Assalamu alaikum. The U.S. Consulate in Dubai is proud to support the Al-Qasimi Foundation in bringing American artists to the UAE. Our partnership with the Al-Qasimi Foundation reflects our mutual support for the arts. As you know, art is a language that can unite people across the world, in this case between America and the United Arab Emirates. This year, we were very proud to support American photographer Robert Clark to participate in the Ras Al Khaimah Fine Arts Festival. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, Mr. Clark was unable to come to the UAE, but we're very excited that he will be able to offer these workshops virtually now. I hope you find this session interesting and very thought-provoking. And we're looking forward to further collaboration with the Al-Qasimi Foundation in the years to come. And now, on with the show.
I was working for the National Geographic on a story about Charles Darwin, and it was a real education for me. It just started to become this kind of unifying thread throughout my work, you know, the rise of mammals, evolution of feathers, story about Alfred Russel Wallace. And then I kept seeing this connectivity from one story to the next. But I see this kind of through line of all this work that I've done, and the through line is the evolution and the history of the planet. My name's Robert Clark. I'm a photographer, and for the past 10 years I've been photographing the physical evidence of evolution. People say the dinosaur went extinct. It really didn't. It's a bird. Birds are dinosaurs. I mean, to the purest ornithologist and paleontologist. The way the human eye has evolved is a little microcosm of evolution in itself. The dogs have a common ancestor, which is the gray wolf, but then they were used for different aspects of what people needed. And you know, it's just fascinating. You look at a bulldog, and then you look at a sheepdog, and then you look at an Irish wolfhound, and you look at a poodle, and they couldn't be more different. But the DNA of these dogs proves that they have a common ancestor. There's a lot of specifics to each story I've worked on, but the overarching connectivity to each story was pressure placed on environments. Things changed, things adapted, things evolved. When I photographed a whale that had hips and legs, that really visually showed me that, wow, there's so many things out there like this that people don't know about. You know, people talk about the greatest story ever told. I think evolution is by far the most interesting. It's the greatest story ever told. There's nothing that can compare to an accurate interpretation and understanding of how the planet evolved, how we got here. It's important. I'm not a scientist. I'm a visual storyteller, and I just want to tell the story of evolution with visual evidence, a massive amount of visual evidence that supports the theory. Very few of us are going to read Origin of Species. The book I'm trying to produce is more visual and it's more accessible, but it's every bit as much based in fact. I just want to produce something people can learn from.
Welcome to RAKFAF workshop with Robert Clark, the U.S. Honorary guest artist today. Thank you for joining us this evening. We are delighted to have the support of U.S. Consulate of Dubai in fostering a cultural exchange between the U.S. and the UAE. Robert Clark is a freelance photographer based in Brooklyn, New York. He is an author of 6 monographs, and he has worked frequently for National Geographic magazine. During his 25 years with the National Geographic, he has photographed more than 50 stories. And his work with the Darwinism and evolution, photographing the elegance, ferocity, and force of birds and their feathers reflects the theme hope in this year's festival. So hi, Robert, welcome to our workshop.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you? How is everything?
It's good, it's good. It's morning here, so it's late afternoon there, so.
Yeah, so good morning to you.
Yeah, good morning from me.
All right, so I will leave the camera and the mic for you, and you could start now. Thank you.
That sounds good. Thank you all for tuning in to the workshop we're doing. It's unusual for me to do a workshop on Zoom. This is a first for me. I've taught a lot of workshops, and generally speaking, you know, it's easier for me to do a sense of hands-on for people, but we're gonna try to make that the workshop translate to a Zoom audience. So this is a first for me. So hopefully it'll work out well. One of the stories I've done for National Geographic, which I ended up making into a book, is about feathers and feather evolution. And it's really, to me, I didn't think about it. I didn't really ever consider that there was a lot of different kinds of feathers, and that feathers had different functions. I mean, there's flight wings and secondary flight wings, downy feathers to keep the birds warm. And I also didn't think about the function that sexual attraction played in the use of feathers. I know that feathers were used as mating rituals for different birds, and but I didn't know how extensive that was. And I also wasn't keenly aware of structural color and what role that plays in feather evolution. And one of the interesting things about feather evolution is that when the light comes into a feather and then it comes out a different wavelength, so that is the reason that most feathers change colors in the sun. It's just kind of a shimmering, attractive quality. And it's the male birds that are the fancy birds and the prettier birds of most species. So one of the feathers I'm going to shoot for you now is a pheasant, and it has several different colors to it. And depending where the light is, you'll be able to see the color shift and the color change. In technical terms, I use a Nikon camera with a Zeiss zoom lens, a Zeiss macro rather, and 100mm lens. I generally keep your f-stop at about between 8 and 11 because that's the sharper level of the lens. Most lenses are sharpest at around that space. And I think one of the aspects of what I was trying to get across to people is like the detailed sense of the feathers. Feathers also, I mean, they're very lightweight, but they're stronger than steel for their weight. So it's you know, to accomplish flight, which is really one of the main aspects of feathers, it has to have a lot of strength and flexibility. So I'm going to shoot a picture or two, and we're going to show you some of the things that I'm shooting as we're going. When shooting the feathers, I want as high res a file as I can get, because you'll be able to see at the exhibit footage that they show, they're going to run quite large. And I've also been interested in certain detail aspects of the feather, which I've also shot too. And then, you know, I think I shot over 100 different species of feathers. You know, the variety is one of the amazing aspects of the process of doing this. And also there's lighting choices, like whether I backlight it and show the translucence of it. And I'll show you that in a second as well. So I'm going to shoot a detail shot real quick, and I'll show you the difference between front light and backlight, considering the detail shots. And I'll explain to you also like the lighting that I'm using for this. It's not a set choice that I make for every single feather. I don't shoot them the same. I tend to shoot things appropriately considering the object you're shooting. And the top of this feather, we're gonna show you some of the different angles. There's a really nice blue in this feather, but we're gonna move the light and you'll see the color change. And that's an example of the structural color. So as you can see, the feather changes colors from blue to green to purple, and that's all based on where the light is, and that's structural color. As I said, the light comes in to the feather and then is reflected, and it comes out at different wavelength. Your key light, your main light, the light we're moving around to show the color, the structural color of this particular feather is over, the exposure is higher on it. It's also more directional, so it shows the some of the shape of the wing, and then some of the color shift in the wing. So what you're seeing here is this feather that is now purple because the lights moved, and we're going to put a card on the other side to even out the exposure some and give a little bit more detail on the left side of the frame. It's not really changing the color of the purple, which is fine. I don't want to change that, but it is kind of adding more detail along the the left side of frame into the brown or the darker part of the feather. It's kind of lifting that exposure a little bit. You know, like we did some of the details of like birds of paradise, because they have these elaborate feathers that are about sexual attraction. We also ended up photographing pictures of all the feather types on one individual bird. So like I say, I'm just trying to give like a sense of the purpose of these feathers. You know, we were showing some of the feathers from different birds, and you know, there's feathers that protect the eyes, and other feathers that help with their balance and their ability to complete their task the way they've evolved. And one other story I did for Geographic I think is worth mentioning is that it was called Dinosaurs That Didn't Die, which is essentially what birds all are, that they evolved based on the environment from being large dinosaurs, terrestrial beings, to being these creatures that were able to fly and exist based on their needs to survive. Because essentially, all species, their main concern is just to push their own species forward. For us, it's to push our DNA forward, and to survive and to continue to grow and change. It's kind of hard to know with each feather how they're going to react to the light until you put a little bit of light on them and just see what you're going to do. And as in, like with this feather, I just wanted to show, I like that. I just wanted to show how structural they are and how much depth they have, because some of the pictures look very flat, and those serve one purpose as far as illustrating them. But I like this too, because it makes it look like it's three-dimensional, like you can pick it up. So that's just to illustrate how small they are and how much, as far as lens choices, what difference it makes. When I started working for magazines, we're shooting chrome film, and it was really much more complicated to do lighting because the lighting had to be very specific. And with digital, there's a little bit of an opportunity because your exposure range is a little different. And so that means if you know what you're doing in Photoshop, you can make some choices. Although also working with magazines, I find, because it's journalism, you don't want to change the information so much that that you're not telling the truth in a way. So even though it's all in your capture, I think from my point of view, I want it to look like it does in real life. I just want to capture the best version of reality that I can. And kind of one of the nice things too is you can also just play with the composition as far as how it's going across the frame. And I think it's fun to do that because you know, if everything's exactly the same, I think it can tend to get a little boring for the viewer. But to alter the way that I'm seeing it is, I think, beneficial to the reader. I've had a lot of experience doing these kinds of things, and I think one reason I get hired is just because it's really about what I find interesting. And since I'm the one, you know, on the ground, on location, shooting these things, it's really why I get hired, I think, in a lot of ways, is because I can make choices in the field that advance the story, not just visually, but also some of the changes I make visually are make the story stronger journalistically. I was supposed to go in person to the festival, but because of COVID, there was restrictions, and I really wish I'd been able to go, because we had figured out a way we'd organized with I guess it was the King's Falcon stable to allow me to shoot some of those, some of his birds, which would have been fascinating, and I hope I can still do someday. So it would have been nice to have that opportunity. You know, also it's a little hard to do when we're doing something like this live, but I would generally have spent 30 minutes or an hour or so making sure we got as much dust off of the feathers as possible. So so we didn't have to do spotting and things. And really for the magazines I work for, which are journalistic magazines, we really don't do much change in the files, but not always. So like he's repairing one of the damages in the feather, but you know, it doesn't.
So after you do a photo shoot, do you usually do a lot of touch-ups like this afterwards?
No, not for magazines, because you keep it pretty pure journalistically. But I sell a lot of art prints through my Instagram site, and you know, interior designers buy them, architects buy them for their interiors of their buildings, and I will retouch some of this stuff. But also the flaws in things make it believable. So I wouldn't fix everything, because I think that there's a saying in English anyway, it's the fly in the ointment that I find that makes things it makes things more interesting to me. You know, when in a world where everything can be perfect, you know, Photoshop of models and things like that, and that I find that it's just much more interesting if things are real to me. So I kind of like that over there, that whole overlap thing, you know. I mean, ultimately I would probably retouch that that gap in the feather out. Actually, let me comb the feather with my hands, and although Nick's doing a nice job of it, let me just see if I can get it on camera that way. Hold on. So this last one that I kind of combed the feather a little bit and took out the area where he was photoshopping things, but also just in moving the light, it gives a really nice edge to where the gray, the light comes around enough to hit the gray where it fills in the shadow. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Does it look good? Yeah, it's very sharp.
So to shoot a feather that you like, how many shots on an average would you take? So I think in like around 40, 50 minutes that we've been in here, you took around 84, but 3 different feathers, correct?
Yeah, you know, it's really hard to say how many frames I shoot per feather. When I think I'm done, you know, quote unquote, done with the feather and I'm satisfied, it's usually one of the last pictures I shoot. And I kind of get a physical sensation that's like, I feel like something's resolved. You know, this is interesting because I've photographed this particular feather a few times, and this is lit differently and looks different than it had in the past. So I'm also shooting this stuff on black so it can be rotated and made vertical or, you know, a little bit catty corner like this. But I'm looking at this and I'm going to make a change and see if I like it. So to answer your question, I don't know. I've shot 500 pictures on some objects, not on feathers, but on some objects, and others I've done in, you know, 20 frames. Like when I actually was in King Tut's tomb, and had like 10 minutes alone in there with just me and my assistant. And I think I made 30 frames maybe, because we didn't have a chance. A lot of times when you don't have a chance to fiddle around with stuff and just overwork things, it's better, but not always. Everything is different, you know, every situation is a little bit more, it's about as complicated as you want to make it sometimes, and it's about as complicated as you have time to do. But for me and for the you know, the people who love photography and who work at it, you know, I have like an emotional response to what I'm doing and just feel like, you know, really comfortable. Would I show this to somebody? Am I comfortable working in that? So I've got an Instagram thing I'm doing right now where I'm getting rid of some books and feather prints on my Instagram, and I was almost done, but I'm gonna actually put this up later today when we're done recording this. So I like it a lot. Which you like better?
So I remember a while ago you were talking about how feathers are alive. So do you think, or do you know whether feathers actually decay as well as time goes on, since it used to be a body part?
That they decay?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. I photographed these several years ago, and I hadn't looked at them for a long time, and they've lost some of their vibrance, some of their color, even though they were stored in a cabinet in the dark. I don't know what happens to the pigmentation, but it does change. And you know, to me, I'm pretty comfortable when things kind of alter and change. So since this is popping up on your screen, I've rotated the camera so it makes the feather more vertical. And I'm going to look at one other thing real quick. Can you see where the light is coming off the feather? The shadow. Yeah. Yeah. So in this, it's all in the subtleties to me. So now you can see in the feather down here at the bottom that the light is kind of falling off the edge of the feather, which I think is nice because I think that means that kind of shows that you can pick it up. You know, I want people to be able to be there and to be able to see what I'm seeing. And I love that this has changed in a way because it's more gray than it used to be. But I think it's really beautiful. I love that color combination of the gray and the orange, burnt orange, whatever color you want to call that. Yeah, so you can see I moved it, and there's more of that. I twisted the feather, and you can see that there's more of a shadow. There's less of a shadow where I hit it for a second. Area exposure ones. Oh. Yeah. So the top of the feather is just a tiny bit hot. So I'm just gonna hot meaning high in exposure. So I'm just gonna change it a little bit. And now I'm gonna tell me what that is. I'm using these nets that drop in to reduce the exposure a little bit. So you put it in front of the subject object, and it will reduce the light. What's that now? Which is totally fine usually. You know, in Photoshop, there's a thing that shows your range of exposure and whether you're going to overexpose certain parts of a picture. And those are that red, what was that setting? Exposure warning. Exposure warning, but you know, it's all there at that rating, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we're gonna see if it's better now. It seems sharper, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then let's look at the top of the feather and make sure there's enough information in there. Okay, so it's funny because it's leaning back and then curling forward, you know, so, you know, it's like how you're going to find it sharp throughout. All right, so I'm going to move on to like the ostrich feather, which is very ubiquitous feather. Everybody's seen it, and it's really frilly and beautiful.
So for this feather in the water, what do you try to capture the most? Is it the texture, or is it the way that it flows down? Is it the color?
Well, there's a lot of things about this I think are beautiful. One thing is, when you look at it in person, it looks all white, but then you put some light on it, and you can see the different kind of brownish, yellowish color of the quill. So I think that's interesting and pretty. Okay, hold on. Make a small adjustment. So I'm going to be done with this in about 2 more frames. I want to do one other feather. It's a really colorful, pretty feather. And this is what I do on an assignment. It's like, oh, that's really cool. I'll shoot something one way and then I'll see it another way. And in a lot of ways, it's about falling in love with something about what you're photographing. And for me, I find this stuff really fascinating. So I want to experience that. I want to have the viewer experience that kind of sense of awe that I get. And I'm incredibly lucky to do the work I've done. I think I've been to 80 countries and have had the opportunity to photograph some really rare, one-of-a-kind things and other beautiful things that nobody ever knows about. So it's a really beneficial thing for me. So hold on one sec. Take a look at that. That looks pretty good. And I think it's at F11. What do you think? The sharpness, check the sharpness throughout. You know, the thing is you get so close to some of these things that are organic and they're not sharp to the camera. They don't have this edge to them because they're organic. So sometimes you have to kind of remember that and take a step back. So we don't have that much time left, but give me a few seconds here. This is a completely different looking feather. It's a feather of a duck. So it's an ornamental feather that goes on its head. Oops. I'm using a little bit of wax on the top of the stand with a specimen pin and sticking it up inside the quill. They tend to not show up, which is nice. I'll let you guys know how I do some of this stuff. And I'm moving the key light around the front so you get a sense of the feather. Maybe a little bounce light on the other side. Let's do white first. Yeah. So we're bouncing a little white into the darker side. You might be able to see it. I just want to give it a little bit more room so the feather can breathe a little bit. It's a completely different kind of feather than we've looked at. And it's a different feather than what people think feathers look like. And again, a lot of times I like to get in and just take a closer look at things, because a lot of people don't ever think about how things look really close, and it helps explain the structure of things, which that's explaining a little bit of the natural world. You know, I love evolutionary biology, and I just like understanding why things on the physical planet are the way they are. Well, I guess we might be really close to out of time. So thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really open to answering questions or working with people who have ideas about how they want to make their photography better. So I'm sure there'll be some information at the end of this to let you know how you can reach me. And you can follow me on Instagram. It's Robert Clark Photo. I post pictures all the time and talk about why I do things the way I do. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Have a great day.